I'm Malcolm Van Dels, and this is an excerpt from the 9-year-old CEO. I'm going to start again from the beginning. Last week, I recapped and continued, but since there were so many new people, they felt unsettled having not heard the beginning. So I thought, okay, it's only 8 weeks, which is a lot. But so here we go. Chapter 1, Beowulf. Beowulf looked out the window of his 96th floor office and sighed. It wasn't easy heading up a company, but he had no choice. The games bouncing around in his head gave him a migraine if he didn't get them out. Once he told Arduino about the games and his plans for several offices around town with secret elevators, rooms, and clubhouses, she said it was all brilliant and started making phone calls. Beowulf didn't know why a woman was called Arduino. It should have been Arduina. He wasn't sure who Arduino knew. She said, a loose conglomerate of hackers and crypto geniuses who will understand your forward way of thinking. At any rate, the first round of funding brought in millions of dollars, and by the time the company went public, shares were selling for $12,000 apiece. They hadn't even published a game yet. But the time was now. Investors were getting nervous. Crash of Santa. It was a good little idea with a simple but compelling storyline. Everyone loves Santa. No one wants to see him crash, especially just before Christmas. But this was the premise Beowulf had chosen for Beowulf, Arduino, and Sullian's first game. Beowulf, Arduino, and Sullian, BOSS for short, was the name of the company and the names of its three principals. Well, Beowulf was the CEO, Arduino the office manager, the chief operating officer, she called herself, whatever. Beowulf didn't care what title she chose as long as she kept delivering the goods. Sullian, Beowulf's brother, was the art director. He looked after both visual and sound design. That is, when he wasn't making YouTube videos. Beowulf liked to keep things simple, hence the company name. He knew things got complicated enough on their own. Keep it simple, stupid. Kiss. Maybe he was only 9, but he wasn't dumb. Crash of Santa had gone over gangbusters with the investors. There was a buzz in the industry about the kid geniuses storming the battlefronts and breaking all the rules. Crashing Santa? Right before Christmas? Beowulf chuckled to himself. He knew there were a lot of poor kids who secretly didn't like Santa. Why did the rich kids get nice stuff while they got, well, he'd known it was a good idea. Thank God Arduino and her cohorts agreed. Sullian, Beowulf called. Sullian! Yeah? Sullian ran into the room, sweeping his Justin Bieber bangs out of his eyes. What's up, boss? How are you doing with that cover art? Fantastic. Do you want to see it? Has Arduino seen it? Yep. We went over the files last night. And? She wanted me to trim Santa down a little. Thought he looked a little, corporate. Corpulent, Beowulf sighed. Yeah, a little corpulent for today's health-conscious parents, she said, so I've been working on that. Sullian was Beowulf's younger brother. Like Beowulf, he was precociously talented. Not only was he an excellent artist, his science and engineering videos were quickly amassing thousands of subscribers, and he'd just hit 1 million views. Disney had called the day before yesterday, and again this morning. I'm not interested in Disney, Sullian had told Arduino. Don't answer their calls unless they offer me a $1 million signing bonus. Wow, Arduino had exclaimed. You play hardball. That I do, Sullian had laughed, but I know what time it is. Arduino had walked out of the room shaking her head. You two boys. Beowulf coughed. Okay, just show me the proofs when they're done, Sullian. Aye, aye, said his brother, giving Sullian a mock salute. After Sullian left, Beowulf sat down at his desk. It was so large he couldn't reach across it. Shiny and empty except for his laptop, his cat's swatty toy, a photograph of him with the queen, and a pad of paper. It was one of those things CEOs had to have to impress investors. Beowulf caught sight of himself in the gleaming surface and grinned. His headaches were mostly gone now. He could do it. It was hard, but he knew he could bring his games to the masses. Chapter 2. Several years before. Several years before, Arduino had found Beowulf alone in a dark gutter. Surrounded by cats who mewed when she walked by, one had refused to let her pass, trying to lead her to a street-side bundle. Finally, Arduino had relented, followed the animal, and was shocked to find a young child huddled in the rain. She ended up taking the child, Beowulf, home, and surprisingly, one of the cats refused to leave. She had no plans to take on a child, or even a cat for that matter, but the child was bold, smart, and after a bath and a meal, began regaling her with stories about how he was destined to change the world through gaming, and how she needed to help him. He couldn't have been more than 3, yet spoke in full sentences. They had to find his brother first, he said. An evil genie had drugged his parents and turned them into slaves, then sold the brothers to a gang of child traders. The genie said he didn't want to change nappies, Beowulf recounted, a serious look in his eyes. I don't wear nappies, and I know where the traders are. Arduino nodded. Beowulf was wearing an old blue t-shirt of hers with a print on the front of an otter wearing a sombrero and dancing in the middle of a bunch of other otters. I'm not like all the otters, it said. The shirt came down to the child's ankles. Beowulf drank his hot cocoa and ate his mashed potatoes and vegetarian gravy. Arduino was vegetarian, but wouldn't touch the asparagus and said he wanted a hot dog. That's what kids liked. She had laughed and something snapped inside her. Chapter 3. We're not selling this kid. We're not selling this kid for less than $500,000, the fat man growled into the phone. Have you seen what he can do? He barely walks but can paint like nobody's business. It's bleeping weird. Uh-huh, uh-huh, he said as a small voice traveled from his cell phone across the room to where baby Sullian sat, painting. The traders had a fully stocked playroom. Cribs lined up on one end. Currently only 2 beds were occupied, by Sullian and one by a sweet little girl a few months older than him that the traders called Tempest. Baby Sullian focused on his canvas, which was really only a piece of paper on the floor. Finger painting was his way of dealing with stress. He'd been working non-stop since he'd arrived, sat surrounded by portraits of his parents and an older brother. The pictures weren't that good. I mean, if he was 10, you wouldn't consider them good, but he was 14 months old. Faces emerged from the masses of paint, revealing a gamut of expressions. Beowulf excited. The boy's mother contemplative and their father angry, for example. There was another set of artworks piled in a corner that Sullian had painted earlier. If the traders had looked closely, they would have recognized themselves in a story. A genie drugs 2 people, and 2 children are traded for a stack of bills. Chapter 4. Bleep. Bleep! Beowulf screamed. Bleep, bleep, bleep! Arduino and Sullian came running into his office. What's the matter? Sullian asked, then smirking added, You don't like my new drawings of Santa? Arduino nudged Sullian. Well, if he wasn't that much shorter than her, being 8 years old, she would have nudged him. As it were, she touched the back of his shoulder and gave him a look that said, Now is not the time for jokes. Of course not, screamed Beowulf. I just received our 3rd quarter projections. Uh-oh, said Arduino. We're down 28%. Beowulf's face was red and his eyes flashing. We've been here before, Sullian replied. No, we haven't, yelled Beowulf. We've only existed for a year. Sullian shifted his feet and looked at Arduino. Don't worry, she said. We'll catch up. When Crash of Santa... Arduino searched for the words. It was September, and they didn't have a prototype yet.